Hey there, and welcome. Tonight, we're re-stepping back in time to explore a part of history you might not expect to be so fascinating or so strange. Get ready to journey into the smoky, bustling, and often overlooked world of Tudor kitchens. Tonight, we're uncovering the hidden horrors, not gruesome or gory, but the daily hardships, hygiene struggles, fire hazards, and let us uncover the untold side of culinary life in the age of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, and unpredictable conditions that made working in a Tudor kitchen anything but easy. We'll explore what they cooked with, how they stored food without refrigeration, and the role servants played in keeping everything running behind the scenes. These were no ordinary rooms. Behind the grand halls and royal banquets, Tudor kitchens were places of non-stop labor, hidden challenges, and surprising innovation. From the moment the fires were lit before dawn to the final scraps cleared away at night, the Tudor kitchen was a world of its own, full of clattering pots, sweltering heat, strong smells, and constant motion. But don't expect the glamour of royal feasts or neat recipe books. So if you've ever wondered what went on behind the scenes of a Tudor feast, get comfortable. You wake to the soft crackle of a fire that never truly goes out. Long before the sun peeks over the fields or the bell rings from the local chapel, the Tudor kitchen is already alive. This is no quiet chamber or private parlor. The kitchen is the engine of the house, hot, smoky, loud, and endlessly busy. You don't come here to relax. You come here to work. Whether you're in a modest yeoman's cottage or the sprawling kitchen complex of a noble household, this space is central to life itself. You feel it the moment you enter. Warmth wrapping around your limbs, the smell of ash. You might be one of many kitchen workers, each with a specific task. A boy tends the fire. A scullery maid scrubs pots with ash and sand. The cook oversees it all, bellowing instructions, keeping time in their head because clocks are rare and timers unheard of. It's organized chaos, and everyone has to know their role. You may never even see the lady or lord whose food you prepare. Orders are passed down through stewards and upper servants. It's here that stories are passed down, that gossip is whispered, and that children first learn the rhythm of daily work. Cast iron pots swing on hooks above open flames. Knives are sharpened regularly with whetstones. Mortar and pestles grind herbs and seeds into pastes and powders. You use wooden spoons, clay jugs, iron spits, and sometimes pewter dishes. You haul water from a well or river and boil it over fire before it's safe to use. They learn by kneading dough with small fists, by counting eggs into a bowl, by sitting near the fire and asking questions. The embers glow softly, casting shadows on the worn wooden table and stone floor. It's where people gather, work, eat, talk, and share life's ordinary moments. It's loud, messy, and sometimes frustrating, but it's the warm heart of every Tudor home, beating steadily beneath beams darkened with smoke and time. The day's labor hangs in the air, on your clothes, on your skin, and in your tired limbs. You know that tomorrow will bring the same routine, the same chores. But for now, you can rest because in this small, vital room, you've helped keep the whole household alive. In many ways, the kitchen is a school, a workplace, and a social hub all at once. Every task takes 10 times as long as it would today, but this is just how life is. It's here that you hear the day has first news, perhaps, shouted through the open window, or delivered by a neighbor with a sack of carrots and a rumor to share. The meals you cook are elaborate, often for dozens or even hundreds of guests. You roast entire animals, shape pastries into the likeness of castles or birds, and layer pies with meat, fruit, and spice. There's no such thing as refrigeration, so everything has to be eaten quickly, preserved in salt, or dried for storage. On these days, you might wake at midnight to begin preparations. Extra hands are brought in, ovens are pushed to their limits, and food is piled high in anticipation. goose stuffed with sage and onions, loaves carved with symbols, stewed fruits, and almond paste confections all crafted in the same space where ordinary porridge is boiled each morning. You hang herbs from beans to dry and keep root vegetables in cool, dark cellars. The smell of a good meal can lift spirits after a long day in the field or at the loom. You learn to recognize the look in someone's eyes when they smell something roasting and realize it's their favorite. You learn the quiet power of comfort food, even in the 1500s. You scrub your hands in ash water, not soap. You learn quickly that cleanliness is not just about appearance, it's about survival. This is where bread is kneaded and baked, where stews simmer for hours, where sides of meat hang in the cool shade awaiting preparation. You might walk between rooms, one for baking, another for boiling, one for roasting, and yet another for preparing sweetmeats and pastries. Coal may be used in some regions, but wood remains the most common fuel. You don't glance at a clock to know when to check the pot. You listen to the rhythm of the fire, the hiss of the pan, the changes in scent. Recipes, if they exist at all, aren't written with measurements or precise timings. They say things like, a handful of flour, or boil it till thick. You learn by watching others, by burning things once or twice, by feeling your way forward. Fires must be maintained carefully, not too hot, not too low. Embers need managing, pans need shifting. There's no thermostat here. You cook by instinct, touch, and long experience. You smell everything at once: honeyed custards, fresh bread, game meat roasting on a spit, and the smoky tongue of burning logs. It's overwhelming, but you get used to it. You learn quickly that food doesn't arrive on a plate, it arrives through effort. And herbs clinging to your clothes, and the persistent hum of motion all around you. In many Tudor homes, especially among the working and middle classes, the kitchen also doubles as a gathering space. The warmth of the hearth draws people in during cold months. Children sit near the fire, helping to shell peas or peel apples. Older folk mend clothes or carve wood in the corner. When visitors stop by, they're as likely to step into the kitchen as they are to the front room, especially if there's a kettle already singing and a fire to warm their hands. If the hall is where meals are eaten, then the kitchen is where life is made. You quickly come to understand the rhythms that define the space, rhythms shaped by the seasons, the sun, and the social class of the household. In a smaller home, it is usually the woman of the house, perhaps with the help of an older daughter or a servant who does nearly everything. Lighting the fire, hauling water, preparing bread, boiling porridge, plucking chickens, grinding herbs. The work is relentless, and it rarely lets up. It isn't just about food, it's about survival. Every bite your family takes depends on the labor that begins in this smoky, soot-stained room. And it's not just about cooking, but life in the kitchen isn't as cozy as it might seem. In wealthier households, the picture looks different, but no less intense. The kitchens of great houses are sprawling complexes, sometimes located in separate buildings to reduce fire risk. Fueling the kitchen alone is a major task. You gather firewood daily, dry it properly, stack it high. Time, too, is measured differently. In noble houses, the kitchen is less a family space and more a professional environment. But whether rich or poor, the kitchen remains the heart of the home. The tools of the kitchen are heavy, worn, and sometimes dangerous. Hygiene is a constant battle. Mice sneak in after dark. Insects find their way into the sugar jar. Festivals and feast days bring a special kind of energy to the kitchen. Despite the difficulty, there's pride in this work. Meals feed families. They bring people together. The kitchen is also where the future begins. Children watch their mothers, grandmothers, or older siblings. At night, when the fire is banked low and the last pot scrubbed clean, the kitchen finally falls quiet. And so, the Tudor kitchen remains not just a place of cooking, but a place of connection. You step into the kitchen before the light of dawn and glance around at the tools you hallel. use for the day. They're not elegant, nor are they particularly clean by modern standards, but they are functional, worn down by years of heat, soot, and grease. You feed it throughout the day, judging temperature by eye and feel, not numbers. There's no dial to turn, no clock to set. Heat is your most precious resource, and you manage it with care. Above the flames, an iron bar or hook system hangs your first key set of tools. You use earthenware jars and bowls for preparing dough, mixing sauces, or storing ingredients. Usually set into the wall and shaped like a deep dome, the oven must be heated in advance. You build a fire inside it, earn it down to hot coals, and scrape the embers out, leaving the thick masonry radiating heat. Timing is everything. You learn to judge when the oven is ready by sticking in your arm, tossing in a bit of flour to see how quickly it browns, or listening to how it sizzles. Wooden spoons, too, are vital tools, each with a different purpose. One may be for stirring porridge, another for folding dough, another just for beating eggs. Some spoons are worn so thin by constant use that you can nearly see through them. Bread, pies, and pastries all go in with a wooden peel, a long-handled paddle used to slide dough into the far reaches of the chamber. A handful, a pinch, a jugful, these are the units of the Tudor kitchen. You hang them over bowls, ladle hot liquid through, and let gravity do the work. Jelly bags made of tightly woven cloth are used for more delicate work like clarifying broths or making fruit preserves. On cooler days, you store meat, milk, or leftover stews here, carefully covered with cloth to keep insects out. Sacks for flour, oats, beans, and grains. You know to tie them shut and hang some from the rafters to protect against mice. Rats are a constant worry. You may use linen soaked in vinegar as a rudimentary wrap to preserve freshness a little longer. You pump the handle up and down, sometimes for over an hour, until cream thickens into butter and separates from the buttermilk. The churn must be cleaned. Well-rancid butter is a disaster you don't want to repeat. A poker might stir coals 1 minute and help adjust a spit the next. Making pastry is its own art form in Tudor cooking, and the tools reflect that. Elaborate molds may be carved from wood or cast in bronze, shaping jellies or marchpane into flowers, animals, or coats of arms. A ladle might serve soup or lift rendered fat into a waiting jar. Nothing is wasted. Every object has more than one job. Scouring pots involves filling them with water, heating them over the fire, then scrubbing with a cloth or brush. Some use dried horsetail plants, known for their abrasive texture, to clean delicate items. You might have earthenware cups or pewter measures, but standardization is rare. You measure by feel. You work with what you have, using clever methods passed down from your mother, your grandmother, and your mother before her. Every tool is a link in that chain rough-hewn, blackened by fire, but shaped by generations of hands just like yours. They're easier to clean and retain fewer flavors than wood. Without these tools, there would be no meals, no warmth, no rhythm to the day. And so you tend them like old friends, because in a place like this, they are. But they break easily, and every dropped bowl means more than just mess. It's a loss of resources. You use them to shift coals, move pans, and rescue dropped utensils. Sometimes you even cook directly with them, clamping food between their iron jaws and holding it over the fire. You know your hand, your ladle, your spoon, and you use them accordingly. They're fragile, though, and a chip in the wrong place means a cracked pot in the fire. Copper pots are used too, particularly in noble houses. They're excellent at conducting heat, but they must be carefully tinned inside to prevent poisoning. Some kitchens have a dedicated spice cabinet, but more often, these rare ingredients are kept under lock and key by the lady of the house or the master cook. Even common herbs like sage, thyme, or parsley must be dried properly and stored in linen pouches or earthen pots to last through winter. Pewter is heavier and more expensive, but easier to clean. Wood is lighter and cheaper, but holds on to flavors. You use what you have and make do. That's something you learn quickly. Never cook acidic food in untinned copper. Not if you want to keep your household healthy. These hooks suspend pots and kettles at varying heights, letting you control how close your dish is to the fire. You raise and lower them by hand, adjusting their position to boil, simmer, or simply keep something warm. A single sharp blade might serve every purpose: slicing, dicing, gutting, and carving. You keep it clean and sharp with a whetstone, which is passed down or shared among the staff. Cutting boards are rare, if used at all. Most chopping happens on a thick block of wood or directly on the kitchen table, leaving it permanently scored and stained. The Tudor kitchen is no place for the faint of heart, and the implements you use here aren't decorative. They are heavy. It might be made of stone, bronze, or even wood, depending on what you have. You crush seeds and dried leaves by hand, swirling the pestle in deliberate circles, coaxing out aromas and oils. Your arms grow strong from this work. There's no shortcut. It rests directly in the fire or hangs just above it, depending on what you're cooking. These let you fry things like flatbreads, pancakes, or slices of cured meat. Mounted horizontally over the fire, the spit is used to roast meat. Not just small cuts either. Whole birds, legs of mutton, or haunches of venison are skewered on the spit and rotated slowly to ensure even cooking. In wealthier homes, a dedicated spit boy, often a young servant, turns the crank by hand for hours. If the household can afford it, a mechanical spit jack, a clockwork or counterweight system, is installed to rotate the spit automatically. But in most homes, it's your arms that do the work. You learn quickly that cooking directly on the coals is common, and ash often becomes part of the flavor. Thick stews, pottages, broths, and boiling puddings all go into the cauldron. Its weight makes it awkward to handle, especially when full, so you use lifting rods or tongs to help maneuver it. Sometimes it takes 2 people just to move it safely. Rough, built to endure fire, time, and constant use. You know each one intimately. Start with the hearth, the center of it all. It's not just a fire. It's a living part of the kitchen. You often work with a cauldron, a large iron pot with a rounded belly and 3 stubby legs. On the hearth floor or in embers, you may also place cast iron skillets or griddles, known then as girdles. Then there's the spit, one of the most iconic tools in a Tudor kitchen. Beside the hearth sits a stack of pots, each with its own quirks. Then there's the baking oven, a beast of its own. Your knives are precious and few. There's no drawer of blades to choose from. For grinding herbs, grains, or spices, you use a mortar and pestle, a tool that has barely changed for centuries. If you're lucky enough to have access to spices, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, they're stored carefully in wooden boxes or ceramic jars. Mixing ingredients happens in wooden bowls often carved from a single piece of timber. Over time, they darken with age and use. For measuring, you rely on judgment and experience more than tools. Straining or separating liquids requires sieves and strainers made from woven horsehair, linen cloth, or loosely woven wicker. Tongs and fire irons are essential near the hearth. Butter churns sit in the corner, usually made of wood, with a simple plunger design. Making butter is slow, rhythmic work. For eggs, milk, and delicate items, clay or ceramic bowls are preferred. Drinking vessels and small dishes are usually wooden or pewter. Larders or cold cupboards act as makeshift refrigerators. Sometimes these are simply stone shelves set into thick walls. Baskets, barrels, and sacks are everywhere. Baskets for vegetables and herbs. Barrels for salted meat and ale. And then there are the everyday tools that double as cooking aids. In larger homes, pastry boards, rolling pins, and pastry jiggers small. Spiked wheels for decorating pie crusts, are part of the kitchen inventory. Cleaning is another task unto itself. Without soap, you rely on sand, ashes, and elbow grease. In the end, the Tudor kitchen is defined not by luxury, but by adaptation. This is your world, this kitchen. And every pot you stir, every knife you sharpen, every ladle you lift, it all brings the household to life. You wake early, the air in the kitchen already thick with smoke and the scent of yesterday's fire. Your first job of the day, I send to cooking, is checking what is still good to eat. In a Tudor kitchen, you don't take food for granted. With no refrigeration, no ice, and no electricity, every scrap of meat, grain, and vegetable must be handled with care and strategy. Your livelihood, and sometimes your survival, depends on it. Cucumbers, onions, cabbage, even fruits like plums or cherries can be preserved this way. Herbs are easy. You bundle them and hang them upside down from beams or in windows where the air moves. Rosemary, thyme, sage, and parsley all keep well when dried. For mushrooms, you slice and thread them on strings, then hang them near the chimney where they harden like wood. Apples and pears can be sliced thin and laid on racks to dry in the sun, though it takes a steady stretch of dry days to do it right. You press the curds, salt them, wrap them, and turn them daily. Some cheeses grow rinds, others are sealed in wax or ashes. You store them on wooden shelves in the coolest part of the house. The smell is strong, but the value is stronger. In lean times, a good cheese is a meal. You've ruined more than a few batches when the weather turns suddenly damp. You churn the cream until it thickens, then wash the butter and mead in the salt. You make August's beans appear in February. Keep March's milk in June. You've seen the difference a well-stocked larder makes in the hungry months, when the garden is bare and the roads are too muddy for markets. Baskets of drying herbs signal autumn. Jars of pickled walnuts mean the summer crop was strong. An empty cheese shelf might mean trouble ahead. You read these signs like a language, learned slowly, remembered in your hands. A single jar of pickled onions or a pot of plum preserve becomes not just food, but comfort. If you're lucky enough to have earthenware pots, you store the butter packed tight, with a cloth and thin layer of water or brine on top. You smell a cut of meat and know whether it can wait another day. You squeeze a fruit and feel its weight change. You tap a jug and hear the hollowness that signals spoilage. In this kitchen, every salted ham, every string of mushrooms, every sealed pot is a small victory. A defense against hunger. A promise that the cold months won't catch you unprepared. In a world without thermometers, scales, or timers, your fingers, nose, and ears become your best tools. With the knowledge that when the frost comes to the window and the garden sleeps, your larder will still whisper, softly, "There is enough." In winter, it will hold for weeks. In summer, it's a race against time. The vinegar is sharp, sometimes overwhelming, but it preserves the texture and holds decay at bay. You don't think of them as conveniences. You think of them as necessities, just like fire and water. And when you walk through the pantry or cellar, your eye passes over each shelf and sack with calculation. What will last? What must be eaten now? What needs to be turned, checked, or boiled? You place fresh eggs gently into a jar, filled with slaked lime and water. Water is often boiled, brewed into ale, or mixed with vinegar to make it safer. You store it in ceramic jugs. Never metal iron or copper can taint the taste. Rainwater is gathered in barrels, filtered through cloth if you're careful. But more often than not, small beer or thin ale is the drink of choice. It's safer, and everyone from children to the elderly drinks it daily. Sealed tightly, they'll keep for months without spoiling. Once brewed or fermented, they keep for weeks, sometimes months, depending on how well they're sealed. You store barrels in the cellar, tapping them sparingly. Spoilage is always a risk-sour ale, musty wine, but you learn the signs, the smells. You learn when to drink fast and when to let it sit. It's not perfect, and the texture changes, but when the hens stop laying in winter, you'll be glad to have them. When winter comes and there's no fresh green to be found, those jars become treasure. The year turns in a slow circle, and the food available to you changes with the seasons. That means you're always thinking ahead. What can be eaten fresh must be eaten quickly. What you want to last through the winter must be preserved. You stew plums or quinces in thick syrup and pour them into glazed pots, sealing the tops with cloth and wax. You layer them carefully, making sure none are bruised or wet. Weevils are the bane of your pantry. If you spot one, you sift the grain through fine mesh, hoping to catch the infestation before it spreads. Some sprinkle salt in the grain to discourage insects, while others line their barrels with dried mint or bay leaves. The smell helps mask any mustiness, but it's mostly a guessing game. You learn to listen tap the side of the barrel and hear how full it is, how dry. The sound tells you what your eyes might miss. One rotting root can spoil a whole basket. You check them weekly, turning them over, removing any that look suspect. Potatoes haven't yet made their way into your kitchen. They'll arrive much later, but other roots serve well enough, so long as you watch them closely. The sugar acts like the salt for meat. It draws out moisture, halts bacteria, and leaves a sticky, sweet product that feels like summer in the middle of winter. Sometimes you make jellies or marmalades, setting them firm with boiled down apples or quinces. They glisten in their jars, catching the candlelight like little jewels. You've learned the tricks through experience and from those who came before you. Nothing is wasted if it can be helped. In wealthier homes, a dedicated smokehouse sits behind the kitchen, but in more modest households, you hang meat over the hearth or in a chamber above it, letting it cure slowly in the smoke. The process I send fast. It might take days, but the smoke imparts flavor and wards off insects and rot. Hams, sausages, even fish are tied with twine and hung like garlands in the rafters, turning brown and glossy with time. When guests visit and look up to see rows of smoked meat swaying above their heads, it's a quiet show of your household's preparedness. Start with the most perishable, meat. In the absence of refrigeration, the only way to keep meat from spoiling is to alter it, make it inhospitable to decay. One of the oldest and most trusted methods is salting. You keep barrels of salt in the pantry, precious and expensive, and when a pig is slaughtered or a side of beef arrives, you rub salt into every crevice of the flesh. Sometimes the meat is packed layer by layer in salt, each piece nestled like a book on a shelf. The salt draws out moisture, and moisture is the enemy. If done correctly, the meat will last for weeks, even months. You might boil the salted meat before serving to reduce the saltiness, but even then, the taste is strong. Still, it's safe, and that's what matters. You also smoke meat. Pickling is another craft you know well. You keep jars lined along a cool shelf, each filled with vinegar and spices. Drying is simpler, but no less important. Fruit is a luxury, and when you have an abundance, you preserve it in sugar if the household can afford it. Root vegetables are more forgiving. Carrots, turnips, onions, and parsnips can be stored in cool, dark cellars, nestled in straw or sand. Grain is precious and fickle. You store flour, oats, and barley in sacks or wooden barrels, sealed tight against pests. Cheese is both food and preservation. Milk spoils quickly, but cheese extends its life by weeks or months. Butter doesn't last long unless you salt it heavily. Eggs can be stored in lime water, a trick you learned from an older cook. Even water needs managing. You don't drink straight from the well if you can help it. Ale and wine are their own forms of preservation. Salt, vinegar, smoke, sun, and time, these are your tools. Nothing lasts forever, but with enough care, you stretch the seasons. You also learn to trust your senses more than any written rule. And though it may look like clutter to the outsider, The Tudor kitchen is a living map of time and labor. You preserve not just food, but stability. This is how you feed a household, not just with flame and recipe, but with foresight, with shelves lined with quiet confidence. The hearth is the heart of the Tudor kitchen, and you know it like the back of your soot-streaked hand. From the moment you step into the kitchen, the fire claims your attention. It must be lit, fed, coaxed, and controlled. And yet, for all your experience, it remains unpredictable. One moment it crackles contentedly, and the next it hisses or flares or dies without warning. You never let your guard down. There's no switch to flick, no knob to turn. Your fire is real alive in its own way, and it can be friend or foe. The type of fuel changes the smell and behavior of the fire. Oak burns hot and steady, but it's expensive. Ash is easier to come by, but it needs time to dry. Wet wood smokes too much. You stack your logs carefully in the corner, always mindful of dampness, always cursing when a batch won't catch. There's no insulation, no control over how much warmth the room receives. In the winter, it's never quite enough. The kitchen becomes the center of the home, not just because of the food, but because of the heat. You feel it through your solace, through your skull. The air doesn't move, thick with smoke and steam. You tie your hair back. You roll up your sleeves. You drink water from a wooden cup and keep going. Meals must be made, no matter the weather. People gather here when the rest of the house turns icy. You keep vinegar and cloth nearby. The old cook once told you to smear ash on the wound. Some days, you wonder what it would be like to cook with buttons and timers and clean air. But then a loaf comes out golden, or a pot of stew bubbles just right, and you feel the satisfaction deep in your bones. You didn't press a button. You made this by instinct, by experience, by hand. A spark leaps to a tablecloth, or an ember rolls under a basket. It's alive, unpredictable, dangerous, and essential. And you sit covered, tired, sweating are its keeper. You've seen it happen. Panic erupts. Water is flung. Ashes scatter. Food is ruined. And sometimes the damage is worse. It hisses and catches with a snap. The kitchen glows warmer. The day goes on. You've heard tales of entire homes lost to kitchen fires. You sleep lightly, always half listening for the crackle that doesn't belong. You tried it once. It didn't help. You keep extra logs stacked against the wall, drying slowly, and you jealously guard them from waste. Pots are hoisted, kettles filled, pans placed with a practiced rhythm. In grand houses, the spit might be turned by a servant, or even a mechanical device powered by a dog wheel or weight-driven gear. You remember the first time you were trusted to tend it alone. Your hands shook. You watched every flicker of flame, terrified it would die out or leap too high. Now it's part of you. You move through the kitchen with ease, knowing exactly when to step back, when to reach in, when to hold your breath. In smaller homes, it's your job to turn it by hand, slowly, evenly, hour after hour. The fire must stay hot, but not so hot it scorches. You come to respect it, even love it, in a way. You learn to read its moods, to sense when it needs more air or more fuel. You talk to it sometimes not out loud, not always, but in your thoughts, coaxing it, pleading with it, warning it. You baste the meat with dripping fat, collecting it in a pan below and brushing it on with herbs tied in a cloth. The fire smokes more when fat drips into it, and you cough through the cloud, eyes watering, face flushed. You use long-handled tools, iron forks, ladles, pokers, because the heat at the edge of the fire is punishing. Your forearms bear the proof. Small burns, hair singed off, calluses thick as bark. You can smell it on yourself, even after you wash, if you're lucky enough to have the time and water to wash. Your clothes are never truly clean. The scent of smoke and meat and bread and sweat blend into something uniquely kitchen-born. You don't wince anymore when the heat blasts your face. You don't flinch when a coal pops. In the summer, it's overwhelming. You sweat constantly, your skin slick, your sleeves damp. But still, you keep the fire going. You kneel at the grate every morning before the sun rises, striking flint to steel until sparks catch. Too little heat, and the food is undercooked. Too much, and you risk ruin. Bread burns easily, stews scald, pastries collapse. A moment's inattention can undo hours of work. And unlike a modern oven, there's no glass door to peek through. You must open the oven built into the side of the hearth by lifting the heavy iron door with a cloth-wrapped hand and judging the heat by feel. Sometimes you toss in a bit of flour and see how fast it darkens. It's not exact, but it's enough. You use dry kindling, twigs, straw, sometimes shavings from yesterday's chopping. You have several stations, different places where embers or coals are moved to cook various dishes at once. There's the main hearth, of course, where the largest pots boil and the meat turns on the spit. Then there are side grates, where smaller pans rest atop iron trivets or are suspended on hooks. You've mastered the art of juggling dishes, shifting pans a few inches closer or further from the flame to adjust the heat. It's a delicate, instinctive craft. There's no dial to tell you, medium-low. You learn to read the fire by color and sound, by the way it licks at the pot or refuses to catch. If you're lucky, the embers from the night before are still glowing faintly, and you can coax them back to life with a puff of breath and a bit of patience. You shield the fledgling flame with your hands, like it's a secret that might escape. As the fire grows, so does the heat, spreading across the flagstones and walls, curling around your ankles and rising into your cheeks. The Tudor kitchen has no chimney in the modern sense. Instead, a wide opening in the wall or ceiling lets the smoke escape more or less. Most of it curls up and out, but a good portion lingers, swirling in the rafters, stinging your eyes and clinging to your clothes. Your lungs grow accustomed to it, though the cough never quite goes away. Soot gathers in corners, on beams, on your face. It turns everything a shade darker. The fire isn't confined to a single spot. You use wood when you can, but peat or dried dung in poorer households. Once the fire's hot enough, the day begins in earnest. The spit is the crown jewel of the kitchen, an iron rod suspended across the hearth where meat is slowly roasted. Every meal is a balancing act. You must watch the fire constantly add wood, rake the coals, shift the pans. Smoke is your constant companion. It stains your skin, makes your eyes sting, settles in your hair. In winter, the fire is a blessing. It keeps you warm, keeps your fingers moving. The dogs curl near it. But in summer, the kitchen becomes a trial. The heat is unbearable. Burns are common. You barely notice them anymore. A brush against the iron pot, a coal kicked too close, a spit handle heated too long. The dangers are real. Kitchens catch fire often. Still, the fire gives life to the household. It's how bread rises, how stews simmer, how feasts are made. Children aren't allowed near the hearth. Not until they've proven themselves steady. Some days, the smoke chokes you. Some days, the fire refuses to cooperate. The fire is never just background. It's the central actor in every Tudor kitchen scene. You wipe your brow with the back of your hand and toss another log onto the flames. You are not alone in the Tudor kitchen, not by a long stretch. The space buzzes with motion and purpose, each person with a task, a rhythm, a place in the hierarchy. From the moment dawn peaks above the rooftops, the kitchen staff begin their quiet dance, moving in practiced patterns that rarely require words. If you are that cook, you do more than stir pots. You manage the entire process. You know the tastes of the household's lords and ladies. You meet with the steward or housekeeper to discuss the day's meals. The kitchen maid or scullion is often the youngest, newest, or least favored. Their job is singular and punishing, turning the spit over the fire to roast meat evenly. If you are the turnroach, you sit close to the flames for hours, hands on the iron crank, sweat pouring down your neck. You cannot look away. You cannot leave. If the roast burns, it is your fault. It is hot, monotonous work, but in some houses, the gardener's apprentice brings in vegetables. The dairymaid delivers milk, cream, and butter. Meals are delayed. Tempers rise. The lady of the house sends down complaints. Punishments may come swiftly, a tongue lashing, extra chores, or worse. But if you prove yourself, if you learn quickly and work without complaint, you may rise. Many cooks started out scrubbing pots or plucking chickens. Your future depends on your resilience. You are expected to function as one machine, with the cook as your operator. You learn timing, intuition, patience. You don't just work, you serve a vital function. The house steward might stop by for a word about the midday meal. A roast cooked to perfection. A tart so pleasing they ask for more. The steward might nod as he passes, or the mistress might mention your skill to a guest. These moments are rare, but they warm you more than the fire ever could. And when the dishes are ready, servers come to carry them to the great hall, carefully, steadily, each tray a test of balance and strength. The kitchen never rests. Neither do you. A quiet joke passed while peeling apples. A song hummed over the roar of the hearth. You know who can be trusted, who gossips, who cuts corners. The kitchen becomes a world of its own, humming with effort and endurance. You move from one task to the next with barely a breath in between. Men dominate the higher ranks, head cooks, meat preparers, pastry masters, while women handle dairy, herbs, or simple baking. But in smaller homes, the lines blur. Everyone does what needs doing. You learn to gut fish, knead dough, slice onions without weeping. There is no room for vanity here, only work. And while guests enjoy roast meats and fruit tarts, you take your own meal from the back table. Boiled scraps, rough bread, weak ale. You eat standing quickly before it's time to begin again. You are lucky enough to share it with a mechanical spit wheel, or even a spit dog, a small breed trained to walk in a wheel that turns the roast for you. But even then, you stay near, ready to jump in when the mechanism fails or the dog tires. If this is your role, you begin your day hauling water in heavy wooden buckets from the nearest well or pump. If this is your role, you check the cool, dark larder several times a day, watching for signs of spoilage or pests. You wipe down cheesecloths, repack butter, weigh flour. In colder months, you shovel ice or snow into storage barrels. In warmer ones, you pray it's enough. You answer to both the cook and the steward. If something goes missing, your name is the first one shouted. You scrub pots blackened with soot, scrape dried fat from trenchers, and scour the floors with sand or lye. Your clothes are stained with grime. Your arms ache by midday, and no one thanks you unless you're missing. You do not cook, not yet, but you watch. You absorb. One day, perhaps, you will be promoted, but for now, you clean. You decide what is needed from the market, from the gardens, from the cellars. You direct the pace and priorities of the kitchen. Everyone knows what must be done. You're part of a team, though the size of that team depends greatly on the wealth and ambition of the household. They measure and mix powders from the apothecary, cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, dried mustard. They chop fresh herbs from the garden, parsley, sage, mint, thyme. These ingredients are precious, expensive, or difficult to grow, and must be handled with care. You might be tasked with preparing sachets, wrapping herbs in cloth for flavoring broth, or grinding spices with a mortar and pestle until your arms ache. If your hands smell of rosemary, you're doing your job well. In a grand noble estate, the kitchen staff might number a dozen or more. In a royal court, it might be several dozen, each role sharply defined. each servant responsible for only a fraction of the total operation. You have earned this place through years of toil, watching and learning, burning your hands, and memorizing recipes that aren't written down. One may tend to meat, another to baked goods, another to sauces or vegetables. These cooks are specialists, often apprenticed for years to learn their niche. If you are one of them, your world narrows to your domain. You rise before sunrise, begin with your mise-en-place washing, chopping, seasoning, and work steadily until the final dish is carried from the kitchen. You do not sit. You barely pause to eat. Your hands are scarred from knives and hot pans, your apron stiff with flour or grease. But your pride lies in your consistency, in dishes prepared just so. You know how to stretch meat, how to reuse broth, how to disguise a turnip as something finer. You command the staff with looks and gestures. When something goes wrong, when the bread fails to rise or the pudding burns, it is you who will answer for it. In a modest home, the cook might have just one helper or none at all. But in every kitchen, the work is constant and the structure is clear. At the top of this pyramid, if the house is large enough to afford such luxury, is the master cook a person of knowledge, experience, and respect. You may never set foot in the hall to serve, but your influence reaches every plate. Beneath you are the undercooks or assistant cooks, responsible for preparing the individual dishes. The lower you go in the ranks, the more physical the labor becomes. There are also turnroaches, especially in wealthier homes. Pantry boys or larders work behind the scenes, storing ingredients and guarding the precious food supplies. The spicers and herb girls, if the house can afford them, deal with finer details. But the kitchen does not exist in isolation. You rely on messengers and errand boys to fetch ingredients from town or collect eggs from the yard. Each role fits together like clockwork. If one person fails, a boy forgets the flour, the scullion drops a pan, the spit stops turning, the whole system falters. Hierarchy is strict. You do not speak out of turn. Orders are followed. Meals come in waves: breakfast, dinner, and supper. Each demands preparation, serving, and cleanup. In some kitchens, especially in wealthier houses, gender roles shape the staffing. You form bonds with your fellow servants, shared glances during rushes. And despite everything, despite the burns, the exhaustion, the endless demands, you feel a sense of pride. You feed the house. Your hands turn raw ingredients into sustenance. Sometimes the lord or lady sends down praise. And always there is tomorrow. More meals to cook. More pots to scrub. More coals to stoke. You begin your day by lifting the heavy latch on the pantry door, the wooden hinges creaking as you step into the dim, cool room. This is your domain as much as the kitchen itself, a place where knowledge is stored as surely as food. A good kitchen servant knows the contents of the pantry like the back of their hand. Every sack of grain, every clay pot of honey, every herb bundle strung up to dry has a place and a purpose. And it is your job to know what is running low before it is missed, and what needs using before it spoils. The pantry is not just a storeroom. It's the nervous system of the Tudor kitchen. You use them to flavor broths, brighten vegetables, or disguise the taste of meat that's gone slightly off. Common choices include parsley, thyme, sage, marjoram, and rosemary plucked from the garden in warmer months and dried for winter. You might have a few pots on the shelf, thick, golden, and sticky, used in cakes, mead, or to glaze meat. Sugar, when you do have it, comes in hard, compressed loaves that must be broken apart and ground with a mortar and pestle. You use it to flavor food, yes, but more importantly, to preserve it. Meats are packed in salt barrels, fish rubbed down and dried to last weeks. You keep a block of it in the corner, chipping off what you need with a small mallet. It crusts the edge of barrels and draws moisture from everything. But without it, you'd have no provisions at all come winter. It is not sprinkled liberally, but rationed. In wealthier homes, sugar might be colored or molded into shapes for display. Apples and pears are kept in cool rooms, turned often to avoid rot. Plums, cherries, and berries are preserved in syrup or dried for baking. Quinces and medlars are stewed or made into jellies. In the autumn, you help gather the harvest, knowing it must last you through winter. When you do get it, it's often mutton, pork, or fowl. They add sharpness to sauces and help cut through the richness of roasted meats. You mix them into pies or use them as decoration in banquet dishes. They're not everyday fare, but it begins, as always, in the pantry. When you see them, you know a feast is coming. You keep clay jugs filled with them near the herbs. A splash here, a spoonful there, they make all the difference. Dried haddock, smoked eel, and salt cod are common. You might also have barrels of pickled herring or small pots of anchovy paste. You treat them carefully, always under supervision. A single mistake could waste more than you earn in a month. These are staples in nearly every pottage, soup, and stew you prepare. Every ingredient tells a story of trade routes, social class, religious practice, and seasonal rhythm. Pottage with leeks and onions, seasoned with thyme. Coarse bread for the servants. White loaves for the family upstairs. If there's enough lard, maybe a tart for supper, filled with stewed apples and spiced with a hint of cinnamon. Not too much. Just enough to be noticed. As you look around, checking the jars and sacks, you understand something fundamental. Your cooking doesn't begin with fire or knives. It begins here, in the quiet, watchful space where ingredients wait to become meals. You store root vegetables in a dark corner, buried in sand to preserve their firmness. Onions hang from braided cords. Dried peas and beans sit in sacks nearby. You use everything. Waste is not an option. On Fridays and during Lent, meat is forbidden, so you lean heavily on these stores. You soak salted fish to soften it, then stew it with herbs or bake it in pies. It's not always a favorite among the servants, but it fills the belly. Beef, more costly, is used sparingly or reserved for feast days. Cheese is another staple, hard wheels of cheddar-like varieties, strong-smelling and sharp. In summer, when milk is plentiful, you might make your own fresh cheeses, pressed into cloth and hung in the pantry to set. You often rely on preserved meats, salt pork, smoked ham, dried sausage. Game birds like pigeon, partridge, or woodcock might hang in the larder, sometimes with feathers still on, ready to be plucked just before cooking. But in your world, it's a treat, not a staple. You crumble them into stews, press them into butter, or steep them in vinegar for medicinal brews. Butter is kept in cool jars or packed in salt, depending on how fast it's being used. Dripping, the fat collected from roasted meat, is stored in crocks and reused, poured over vegetables or used to line pans. You are careful not to let it go rancid. In the absence of modern refrigeration, you learn to trust your nose. If something smells wrong, it likely is. A well-stocked kitchen always smells faintly of lavender or mint, even when the meat is cooking. It reflects the wealth, status, and habits of the household. These are the jewels of your stores, precious and used sparingly. A pinch of pepper might cost more than a day's wages. Cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and ginger come in small, carefully wrapped parcels. If you're trusted with them, you keep them under lock and key. You never use them casually. They flavor rich dishes served at the master's table, sweetmeats, stewed fruits, elaborate sauces, and are signs of refinement and wealth. You know how to grind them just enough, how to measure them so their presence is felt without overpowering the dish. You never waste a single grain. You'll often find coarse, dark flour made from rye or barley for the servant's bread. It's heavy and dense, the kind that sticks to your ribs. For the masters of the house, there's finer wheaten flour, sifted to remove the bran and used for softer, whiter loaves. You keep sacks of it raised off the floor on wooden pallets to avoid damp and mice, but you still check daily for signs of spoilage or weevils. Oats, too, are kept in bulk used in porridge or to thicken stews, especially in colder months. In a noble estate, the shelves might be stacked with imports, almonds, dates, white sugar, and sacks of spices from far-off lands. In a modest home, the pantry is humbler but still essential. A cook cannot prepare meals without ingredients, and even the best hands are useless without flour or lard. The staples start with grains. Bread is the backbone of every Tudor table, and flour is treated with the reverence it deserves. You measure by handfuls and weight pounds, stones, bushels. There's no running to the shop if you run out. Everything must be accounted for in advance. You know how much to expect each week. You keep a mental tally of what you've used, and if you forget, you answer for it. Legumes and pulses are your next most common ingredient. Beans, peas, and lentils are stored, dried, and soaked before cooking. They provide a vital protein source for households that cannot afford fresh meat daily. You might boil peas into a thick mash or toss beans into a pottage with onions and herbs. These are not luxury foods, but they are hearty and filling. You use them often and with care. Tucked on the higher shelves are the herbs tied in neat bundles to dry, or crushed into powders and stored in small earthen jars. But it's the spices that give your pantry its power and prestige. For sweeteners, sugar is a luxury, but honey is more common. Your pantry also holds various forms of fat. Lard, rendered from pork, is essential for frying and pastry making. Salt is your friend and lifeline. The meats in the pantry vary wildly based on the season, the household's wealth, and the occasion. Fresh meat is rare, expensive, and quick to spoil. Fish, especially in religious households, is a staple. You also keep a supply of eggs, tucked into baskets lined with straw, carefully turned and used in everything from pastries to sauces. From the garden come vegetables, onions, leeks, turnips, carrots, and cabbages. There's also fruit, but it's seasonal. Vinegar and verjuice, a tart liquid made from unripe grapes or crab apples, are your go-to for pickling and preserving. And while you won't find chocolate or tomatoes, which haven't yet reached England, you do have access to imported dried fruits like figs, raisins, and dates in wealthy homes. On the rarest occasions, you might also work with almonds, rice, or olive oil, not local staples, but exotic ingredients brought from abroad and reserved for high-status dishes. Your pantry is more than a room. It's a reflection of the times. You reach for the flour, your fingers brushing the rough weave of the sack. You mentally plan the midday meal. The day is long. You wake up before the sun. The kitchen is still cloaked in shadows, the hearth cold, and the air damp with last night's smoke. Before a single pot is set on the fire or a joint of meat is hung near the coals, your work begins, not with cooking, but with cleaning. Soot stains the beams above. Ash collects in every corner, and the scent of smoke, meat, and damp wood clings to everything. But you don't think of it as dirty. You think of it as lived in, as functional. Cleanliness is not about sterile surfaces or bleach. It's about managing the mess well enough to keep the food edible and the household running. Or at least, what you understand to be cleaning in Tudor times. Large pots, blackened from hours over the flame, are scrubbed with a stiff brush made of twigs or bundled reeds. Sometimes sand or ashes are used to scour the inside. Iron skillets are oiled lightly to keep them from rusting. You don't wash everything with soap. That would be a waste. You clean enough to prevent old grease from turning rancid, to stop yesterday's stew from flavoring today's broth. You hang herbs like lavender and mint to repel them, and sometimes a strip of sticky honey-coated paper is suspended to trap the boldest. You keep dishes covered when possible, and you work quickly. You inspect the meat hanging from hooks, patting the salted hams to check their firmness. You brush away any developing mold with vinegar. You test the brine barrels for cloudiness. Spoiled meat is a disaster, not just a waste of precious resources, but a risk to anyone who eats it. Once every few weeks, you help brush down the flue with a bundle of thorny branches. Chamber pots are kept away from the kitchen, and privies are usually out back, separate from the main house. You boil more water, add more vinegar, sweep more often. You might hang bunches of lavender or wormwood by the windows to clean the air. Some believe it wards off bad spirits. Others just like the smell. They taste the end result, but never witness the early morning scrubbing, the constant battle against pests, the little rituals you perform to keep food safe. You never speak of the worst messes. You simply handle them. But smells travel, especially in the summer. You burn herbs in the hearth to mask unpleasant odors. Sometimes rosemary, sometimes bay leaves. Scented rushes are scattered near the door. You do what you can. You cough and gag on the soot, but it must be done. You've learned to swat with one hand while stirring with the other. You might not know why you cover the butter with cloth, but you do. You might not understand the science behind vinegar's acidity, but your grandmother did it, and you trust her wisdom. Wipe the table, cover the pots, sweep the floor. Not sterile, not spotless, but prepared, watched, managed, balanced between function and decay. The smell of grease still lingers, but the surfaces are clean by your standards. You rest knowing you've done your part. You've kept the household fed and safe with your bare hands and simple tools. Generations of cooks have passed down these habits, and you add your own little adjustments as you learn. The ashes must be scraped out from under the iron grate, carried outside, and dumped into the midden heap. Linens, aprons, and cloths are boiled with lye, scrubbed on boards, and dried in the sun. In smaller households, you manage what you can soaking towels in vinegar, laying them over hedges to bleach in sunlight. Spoiled meat smells wrong. Moldy bread turns your stomach. Milk that sours too fast means something is off. You rely on your sense of sight, smell, taste to judge safety. And above all, you trust experience. You've seen what happens when food is poorly stored. You've heard the tales of sickness that spreads through whole households. You know that damp wood is dangerous. It can rot or grow mold. Stone or packed earth, uneven and pitted, it collects crumbs, spills, and soot. You're expected to keep your apron clean, your hair tied back, and your hands reasonably washed. There's a basin outside the kitchen door, or water is poured over hands before meals. You scrape your fingernails with a small knife. You wash your face in the mornings. It's not a thorough scrub, but it's enough. You sweep it regularly with a stiff broom, pushing dust toward the doorway and tossing larger scraps to the waiting chickens outside. Straw is sometimes scattered across the floor to absorb grease and mud. You replace it when it's too filthy to be of use. It's not pristine, but it's functional. So you inspect the grain for dark spots, split edges, or foul smells. If a board starts to sour, you soak it in vinegar and dry it thoroughly. Still, the wood holds memories, garlic, onions, lard. You accept that some smells will never come out. You use a flat shovel and a warm broom to sweep away the worst of the soot. Some ash, though, is saved. It will be mixed with water to make lye for soap or used to scrub tough stains from pots. Nothing is wasted. You fight a daily battle against rats, mice, flies, and beetles. You leave a scrap of meat out for them now and then, but they mostly fend for themselves. Their presence is tolerated, even welcomed, so long as they keep the vermin down. The pantry is sealed as best it can be. You store grains in thick wooden chests with tight lids, hoping to keep out the mice. You check for gnawed corners, small droppings, or scratch marks. Cheese is hung from the ceiling in netting, dried meats stored high above ground level. But the rodents are clever. Trap simple spring mechanisms or weighted buckets are set at night, and in the morning you check them grimly. To a modern visitor, the Tudor kitchen might look filthy. You know the smell. Warm wood, old grease, and smoke curling up into the beams. There is no running tap, no soap pump at the sink. Every drop is precious. The cleanest water is used for cooking and drinking. The rest, often cloudy, sometimes shared between tasks, is used for scrubbing surfaces, rinsing pots, or soaking stained linens. You learn quickly to prioritize. Oiling water helps when you can spare the firewood, but fuel is costly and tightly rationed. You wipe down the rough wooden tables with a damp cloth soaked in vinegar or brine. There are no sponges or disinfectants, only elbow grease and what the household can afford. Vinegar is favored when available. It cuts through grease and leaves a faint, sharp scent behind. You start with the hearth, the very heart of the kitchen. Once the fire is rekindled, the heat will drive out some of the dampness. Water is brought in from a well or stream, carried in heavy wooden buckets that splash as they walk. Utensils and cookware are cleaned after use, but not in the way someone centuries later might expect. Cutting boards and wooden bowls are wiped and left near the fire to dry. The floor is another matter entirely. And then there are the pests. Cats are your allies. Many kitchens keep one or two half-wild mousers who roam the rafters and corners, slinking silently after movement. Flies are harder. In summer, when the doors are left open for air and light, they swarm. You don't know the word, bacteria. You've never heard of germ theory. But you do understand that some things make people sick. The larder, the cold storage space, is another area that must be monitored. Even the servants themselves are part of the kitchen's hygiene. In larger houses, the laundry is a separate task entirely, handled by a dedicated washerwoman. The chimney must be cleaned regularly, too. Soot buildup can cause smoke to back up into the room, or even start a fire. Then there's human waste, an issue always present in a world without plumbing. If you notice signs of illness in the house, sour stomachs, bad humors, you take extra care. Superstition and practice often intertwine. Visitors to the house rarely see this side of the kitchen. And at the end of the day, when the last dish is cleared and the embers of the fire are glowing low, you do it all again. To you, this is what clean means. Tomorrow, it will begin again. You notice the scent before you even step into the room. It leaks out from under the wooden door, curls around the corners of the hallways, and clings to your clothes even after you've left. A Tudor kitchen doesn't smell like any one thing. It smells like everything, all at once. It's the scent of life in motion, of meals prepared, fires stoked, herbs crushed, and work done over and over again, every day. When you push the door open, it hits you with full force. Salted fish, hung from hooks to dry, emit a pungent grittiness. Smoked hams, rubbed in spice and turned regularly, give off an oily, meat-rich scent. It might be pottage today, a stew of barley, onions, peas, and whatever bits of meat or herbs are on hand. Whether it's a fine white loaf for the gentry or a darker, coarser bread for the staff, the scent of baking fills the space like a hug. There's the lingering reek of spilled milk that wasn't cleaned quickly enough. The smell is subtle now, muted by the cooler air, but in summer, it would be far worse. This is a room filled with bodies, servants bustling, cooks shouting, scullery maids bent over wash basins. They sweat. They breathe. They wear the same clothes for days on end. There are no deodorants or daily baths. When the wind shifts, you might even get the hint of chimney smoke from another household, blending into your own. The smell of effort and labor settles into the very stones. Orange rinds stuffed with clove and herbs are hung by doorways or tucked into aprons. The lady of the house may even dab her handkerchief with rose water before entering the kitchen. But for those who work here daily, the smells become part of life, so familiar that you stop noticing them until something changes. It's a smell you might not even notice at first, until you step outside into the garden and realize how much lighter the air feels. The stronger odors have faded. What's left is the scent of worn stone, of ashes, and the soft herbal residue left in the rushes on the floor. You sweep again, toss out the worst scraps, rinse the bowls, and pat the dough for tomorrow's bread. The room breathes with you, quieter now, less crowded, but never truly clean of scent. You make a note to empty it before the flies find it. The scent clings to your hair, your sleeves, the folds of your apron. You might bathe tomorrow or not, but people will know where you've been. They'll smell the kitchen on you, the smoke, the spice, the sweat, the labor, and they'll know. A pan of used lard sits cooling on the counter, its surface filmed over with a thin layer of fat, and the air tells the story. That, too, gives off a smell. Not exactly foul, but rich to the point of nausea if you stand too close. You can smell the faint tang of it turned sour, hiding behind the table legs or clinging to the cracked wood of a shelf. Someone will wash the spot with vinegar soon, but for now, it's there, sharp and unforgiving. By mid-morning, as food prep revs up, the scent shifts to vegetables, hot water, and whatever meat is on the menu. If something is roasting on the spit, the whole room tilts toward its fragrance. Pork with rosemary, perhaps, or a game bird rubbed in salt and pepper. The heat intensifies it, the fat dripping into the fire with little hisses, sending up smoky bursts that coat the ceiling beams. Later, during cleanup, the smells become more acrid. Old grease, scalded milk, singed cloth. The sweetness fades. The work continues. You lean close to the oven's edge, careful not to burn yourself, and catch that fleeting moment just before the crust begins to brown. Sweet almost like honey, but grounded by the flour and stone the dough was kneaded on. A burnt smell means someone has left the bread too long. A sour one could signal spoiled stock or an egg gone off. Sweetness too early in the day means someone has snuck a pie onto the fire ahead of schedule. You trust your nose almost as much as your hands. The smell is deep and satisfying. Earthy, hearty. It's the smell of sustenance, of something that fills your belly, not just your nose. You could pick out the individual ingredients if you tried. The sharpness of sage, the sweetness of parsnips, the sour tang of vinegar drizzled at the end to cut through the richness. You're used to it, but if you're new, it might hit you like a slap. It's not spoiled, not at all, but strong. These are staples. Without them, the kitchen wouldn't function. You breathe through your mouth for a moment until your nose acclimates. Not a foul smell exactly, but one so dense, so layered, that your senses take a moment to adjust. And turnips that have just been pulled from storage. Root vegetables, kept in dark cellars or packed in straw for the winter, always bring a hint of soil with them. Not unpleasant. In fact, there's something comforting in it. A reminder that even amidst the fire and iron and stone, all food begins in the dirt. You walk across the stone floor, careful not to step on the damp rushes scattered for traction and scent. The straw crunches slightly underfoot, but it's the herbs strewn among it that really catch your attention. Lavender, mint, rosemary, and occasionally dried orange peel. The servants replace the rushes periodically, especially when they become soaked with grease or tracked in dirt. But it has not just to keep things tidy, it has to help mask the odors that build up in a room where meat roasts. Cheese sweats and flour dust hangs perpetually in the air. First comes the smoke. Always the smoke. The hearth has been burning since sunrise, and long before that, in colder months. The smell of charred oak and hazel clings to the air, clinging to your hair, your sleeves, the very walls of the kitchen. It mingles with the soot rising up toward the rafters and the faint, acrid scent of wood tar sealing gaps in the beams above. Then, beneath the smoke, other smells emerge, richer, more specific, and ever-changing, depending on the time of day. You inhale again, more purposefully now. There's the unmistakable sweetness of cinnamon and nutmeg, just barely clinging to a mixing bowl from the morning's preparation. These imported spices are rare, and their use is sparing, but when they're present, they dominate. Mixed with sugar in a pie or baked into a custard, they create a warmth that lingers hours after the dish has left the oven. If the household is wealthy enough to afford cloves or mace, they leave an almost medicinal sharpness behind, striking your nose with authority. In the corner near the pantry door, a different smell lingers, one of age and preservation. Nearby, someone is chopping onions. The sharp, eye-watering tang fills the lower part of the room, mixing with the sweet earthiness of leeks close to the fire. A large iron pot simmers, sending up wafts of steam that hit you like waves. And then there's bread. The smell of it is unmistakable, yeasty, warm, and so inviting it could stop you in your tracks. But it's not all comforting. Other smells lurk here too, reminders of just how human this space is. You pass by the bucket where scraps are collected, vegetable peelings, bones, fat trimmings. And always, below everything else, there's the underlying smell of people. Not just one person, but many. You start to recognize the timing of smells. Early in the morning, it's mostly smoke and yeast and cold iron. Outside the kitchen door, you'll catch other scents drifting in. Damp earth from the garden after rain, manure from the stables, or the tannic reek of leatherwork from the yard. The smells are clues too. You learn to read them like a map. In wealthier homes, perfumed pomanders might be carried by servants to cover some of these odors. At the end of the day, when the fires have burned low and the last plates have been scrubbed, the kitchen smells ... tired. And when you walk out into the night air, crisp and cool, you carry all of it with you. You fed a household today. You begin your morning with the sound of the grindstone, a rhythmic, gravelly song that hums through the air long before the kitchen is warm. Before anything can be cooked in a Tudor kitchen, it must first be prepared, and that preparation is often more time-consuming and labor-intensive than the cooking itself. But in smaller households or for special dishes, it falls to you. You kneel beside the quernstone, 2 thick, circular slabs stacked like wheels, and pour a handful of dried wheat into the opening at the top. With both hands on the handle, you begin turning. The meat is already on, a joint of pork this time, and it must be rotated constantly. The fire beneath is uneven, and without regular turning, one side will burn while the other stays raw. This is one of the most ancient methods, baking in embers. The dough is shaped into small loaves or flat cakes, and placed in a ceramic pot with a lid. Sugar, too, if available, must be broken into smaller chunks from the hard cone it arrives in. In wealthier households, there might be a spice cupboard or a dedicated spice grinder. The churn is a tall wooden cylinder, filled with cream, and worked with a vertical plunger for what feels like eternity. The surface is dusted with flour, the dough warm and elastic. You dip your fingers in water, fold edges, press seams closed, shape the food into forms pleasing to the eye. Mushrooms laid on wicker trays, herbs tied in bundles and hung from the beams. Preservation is part of preparation. You think ahead. If you have too many apples, they must be stewed or dried. If you've killed a pig, you salt the cuts, stuff the intestines for sausages, smoke the belly meat. Nothing is wasted. Everything must be processed, stored, managed. You don't just cook food, you care for it, from root cellar to table. Food must be beautiful, especially in households where status is displayed on the dining table. You mold them into swans, castles, or flowers. Not just food, but a statement. She tests it with her knuckles, feels for the right resistance. Even after the main meal is over, there's dough to set for tomorrow, broth to start, beans to soak. Your hands smell of onions and ash, your apron is dusted with flour, and your arms ache in the best possible way. Because this kitchen feeds not just people, but a household's very rhythm. Every preparation is a step in a larger dance. It will become a crust for meat pie, or maybe a simple bread to feed the staff. Preparing not just food, but something far more vital, the shared experience of nourishment in a Tudor world. Either way, the work is the same. Deliberate, repetitive, learned through practice. You might take turns with another servant. You talk, joke, sing under your breath as you push and pull the plunger up and down. The moment when the butter separates is almost magical, solid, forming out of liquid, golden, and rich. You scoop it out, rinse it in cold water, pat it into shape, and sprinkle it with salt to preserve it. But more often, it's done by hand. You lean your weight into the pestle, grinding cloves until the aroma rises warm and sharp into your face. These spices are expensive, guarded. Only a pinch makes it into the final dish, and you measure it with care. The entire thing is buried in hot ash and embers, turning the pot into a mini oven. Just a wooden bowl and a bundle of twigs tied together into a rough whisk. It's a laborious task, done in circles, switching arms when fatigue sets in. The result, if done well, is thick, soft cream ready for tarts or pudding. If done poorly, it turns to butter, which fortunately isn't a total loss. You wait, smelling for the telltale scent of browning bread. It takes experience. There is no temperature gauge here, only instinct. Turning the spit isn't an easy job. It requires strength, timing, and endless attention. You have to know when to speed up, when to slow down, when to tilt it slightly for better browning. Some homes have mechanical spit jacks powered by counterweights, or even small dogs running on a treadmill. But here, it's done by hand. You've done it before. Hours spent with your hands on the iron crank, sweat beading your forehead, soot drifting up from the flames. The reward is in the scent, that savory smell of fat sizzling, dripping into the fire, sending up bursts of smoke that coat the kitchen ceiling. The stones scrape against one another, cracking the grains and slowly turning them to flour. Inside, a pottage simmers, a rich stew of grains, vegetables, and perhaps a few bits of meat or marrow bone. Boiling is more forgiving than roasting. You can walk away for a few minutes, stir occasionally, let the ingredients soften and blend, but it has its own rhythm. You must know when to add things and in what order. Onions too early will dissolve. Herbs too late will taste raw. You drop in a handful of dried peas, stir slowly, and listen. A gentle bubbling sound tells you the fire is strong enough, but not too fierce. It's a hard, dusty task. Your arms ache, your sleeves turn white, and your breathing becomes shallow to avoid inhaling the airborne powder. Yet when you lift the top stone and feel the fine flour beneath, there's pride in it. First, the oven must be heated, a roaring fire built inside and maintained for an hour or more. Then the embers are scraped out, the interior wiped down with a damp cloth, and the heat allowed to settle. You learn to judge the temperature by tossing in a pinch of flour and watching how fast it browns. Then and only then do you slide in your pastry, your pie, your batch of rolls. Timing is everything. If the oven is too cool, nothing will bake. Too hot, and it will burn in minutes. This will become bread, or pastry, or dumplings. Something warm, something filling. Chopping, grinding, sifting, pounding, turning. The tools may be simple, but the skill behind each movement has taken you years to master. Your first task is often grinding grain for bread. In wealthier houses, this might already be done at the mill. Elsewhere in the kitchen, a boy is pounding oats with a wooden pestle in a thick mortar. The sound echoes, dull thuds as the pestle drops again and again. He's not just softening them, he's creating a meal base, something to stretch meat or enrich pottage. The mortar is heavy, the pestle heavier. It's slow work, but necessary. Everything in this kitchen must be transformed before it can be cooked. You glance toward the chopping block, where another servant is working with practiced speed. The knife in his hand isn't delicate. It's broad, heavy, slightly worn. But in the right hands, it moves with precision. He slices onions, leeks, and garlic bulbs, laying each in a neat pile. The sound of chopping blends with the grinding behind you, a symphony of preparation. His fingers curl slightly, protecting themselves from the blade, and his movements are fast. Not rushed, just experienced. Every dish in the kitchen begins this way, with raw ingredients reduced to manageable sizes. Carrots are cut into coins, cabbage shredded, herbs chopped so finely they become a paste. You can smell the sharp green of parsley rising in the air as he works. At the hearth, someone else is turning a spit. Roasting is only one method. Nearby, a great black cauldron hangs over the flames, suspended from a swinging iron arm. Off to the side, someone is baking. Not in an oven, not yet, but in a covered dish placed in the ashes. When the dish is ready to go into the large brick oven, the process becomes even more involved. Grinding also continues beyond grains. Spices must be pounded in the mortar: peppercorns, mustard seed, dried ginger. Elsewhere, someone is whipping cream, or trying to. There are no hand mixers here, no electric tools. Churning butter, in fact, is another preparation all its own. Back at the table, dough is being kneaded. The cook pushes it down hard with the heels of her hands, folds it, turns it, presses again. Then comes stuffing and wrapping. Cabbage leaves blanched and rolled around minced meat. Dough wrapped around apples. Sausages tied off with string. All by hand. Not all preparation is for the hearth. Some food is dried. Fruit sliced thin and strung to hang above the fire. Sometimes you're asked to prepare decorative dishes, subtleties made from marzipan, dyed with saffron, or beet juice. These require even more care. As the day progresses, you realize food preparation never really stops. Something is always being peeled, ground, chopped, or stirred. And you're part of that rhythm now. Chopping, grinding, kneading, boiling. You start your day knowing that water will shape much of what happens in this kitchen, whether it's for cooking, cleaning, or simply quenching thirst. But in a Tudor household, water is far from the easy convenience you might expect today. There's no running tap at the turn of a faucet, no endless supply flowing from underground pipes. You can't take too much time. Others are waiting. The water is cold and clear, but you know better than to expect it to be clean by modern standards. It might be muddied with soil or tainted by nearby animals. Sometimes you see bits of debris floating, a leaf, an insect, or worse. Kitchens are smoky and grimy places, filled with soot from the hearth and grease from roasting meat. After cooking, you must scrub pots, pans, and wooden utensils. But without detergents, all you have is water and sand or ashes for scouring. You often see coarse sand piled nearby, ready to be sprinkled into pots before scrubbing with a rough brush or a bundle of twigs. Drinking water often comes from the same wells used by animals, or where waste sometimes leaks nearby. Waterborne illnesses are common, although few understand the cause. If someone falls ill after drinking water, it's attributed to bad luck or divine punishment, not the invisible threats lurking in their cup. Roofs and gutters might channel rain into barrels or cisterns, but contamination from bird droppings, leaves, and dirt is always a concern. You must filter and often boil rainwater before it's safe for cooking or drinking. Without proper drainage, stagnant pools form, attracting flies and rodents, worsening sanitation. Every drop counts. Wasting water isn't just careless. It can mean spoilage, illness, or delayed meals. It's the thread that connects every task, from the grinding of grain to boiling a pot to washing a serving dish. Without it, nothing happens. You respect water, you guard it, and you master the art of making the most of it. The effort is laborious. Grease clings stubbornly to metal and clay, and rust forms easily on iron tools if not dried quickly. A damp cloth to wipe your brow, a splash of water to cool a hot pan handle. These small comforts make your long hours near the fire bearable. The kitchen, with its water and its fires, is a complex ecosystem, chaotic yet vital. And you, through sweat and patience, have kept it alive for another day. You do what you can, filtering through cloth or letting sediment settle before use. You balance this carefully, heating water over the fire in a kettle or cauldron and mixing it with colder water to avoid burning your hands. Every step requires careful timing and a keen sense of economy. Instead, every drop must be fetched, stored, and carefully rationed. Yet you know the water can be a source of contamination too. You might send a runner multiple times to fill barrels before a large feast or festival. During dry spells or winter freezes, the task becomes even more urgent and difficult. Ice blocks the wells, rivers slow, and the supply dwindles. Sometimes you're forced to melt snow or ice, a slow and fuel-consuming process. The very vessels used for cooking or drinking may harbor bacteria if not cleaned regularly. These distinctions matter. A jug marked with a symbol or placed on a higher shelf might be reserved for consumption only. You're careful to keep these vessels clean, wiping them down after use and storing them away from smoke and dust. The wooden buckets and barrels, porous and difficult to sanitize, become breeding grounds for germs. The struggle to manage water quietly underpins your entire day. Your first task often involves heading out to collect water. If you're lucky, there's a well or spring nearby, perhaps within the courtyard walls or just beyond the kitchen garden. But many times, you must walk to a public well or a nearby river. These vessels, while sturdy, aren't airtight. Water stored in them will stagnate quickly, especially in warm weather. You're always mindful of this, because bad water means bad food and sickness. Some households try to keep their water cool by storing jugs in cellars or shaded corners, but that's no guarantee. The smell of sourness, the appearance of scum on the surface, these are signs you must watch for carefully. The journey isn't short, and the container you carry isn't light. A wooden bucket or a leather water bag, both prone to leaking, becomes your constant companion. You balance it carefully as you navigate cobblestones or muddy paths, eyes watching for tripping hazards or rival fetchers. Once at the water source, you dip your bucket carefully, trying not to disturb the silt at the bottom. Back at the kitchen, you pour the water into large earthenware jugs or stone basins. Water's uses in the kitchen are many. You need it to soak grains and pulses overnight, to soften dried beans or peas that will later become pottage. It's essential for boiling vegetables, making broth, and cleaning pots and utensils. But with limited supplies, you learn to be thrifty. The water used for washing vegetables might be reused to scrub floors or rinse tools. There's little room for waste. Cleaning itself is a challenge. Washing dishes also presents a dilemma. Water that's too cold won't clean grease properly, but boiling water is a precious commodity. Water is also central to personal hygiene, washing hands before meals, rinsing knives and cutting boards, and cleaning the floor and tables. The risk extends beyond the kitchen. To combat this, some kitchens keep separate vessels for drinking water and cooking water. Water collection itself is an all-day affair during busy times. Rainwater collection offers some relief, but it's an imperfect solution. Aside from water for cooking and cleaning, you also rely on it to fight the smoke and heat that build in the kitchen. In some households, there is a rudimentary system of pipes or channels made from wood or clay that help carry wastewater away from the kitchen, but often it simply seeps into the yard or nearby gutters. You learn to anticipate these challenges. Each morning, you plan your water use carefully. How much for cooking? How much for washing? Can you reuse the rinse water? Despite these hardships, water remains a life force in the Tudor kitchen. By the end of a long day, when the fires die down and the pots are clean, you sit back with a sense of accomplishment. You quickly learn that the Tudor kitchen is ruled by the seasons. Unlike today, where ingredients arrive year-round thanks to global trade and refrigeration, your menu depends entirely on what the land and sea offer at any given time. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter each bring a different rhythm, and with it, different challenges and opportunities for cooking. In spring, the kitchen awakens from the long, lean months of winter. Fresh greens like wild garlic, nettles, and ramps appear in hedgerows. You gather these tender shoots early, mindful that they are fleeting gifts. Fruits like cherries, strawberries, and early apples arrive, though they are luxuries saved mostly for the wealthy or special occasions. Venison, pheasant, and rabbits hunted by the household or nearby woodsmen are brought to the kitchen, where they are carefully cleaned and cooked in stews or roasted for feasts. The smell of dried herbs hanging from rafters mixes with the hearty aroma of stews, thickened with barley or oats. You use stored grains, dried legumes, and salted meats to create filling meals that keep the household warm and fed. You learn the importance of conserving every bit bones for broth, scraps for pies, nothing wasted. Christmas, Michaelmas, and other feasts are times for rich dishes, often involving pies filled with meats, fruits, and spices. You might prepare a spiced boar's head or a rich fruitcake, festive treats that require hours of preparation and the finest ingredients the household can afford. You're not just a cook, but a steward of resources and tradition, preserving knowledge passed down through generations. Tables groan under platters of food, and the smells and colors of dishes create a sensory feast. You watch as family and guests enjoy the fruits of your labor, the hardships of seasons forgotten in the joy of sharing a meal. Cooking fish is delicate work. You know it must be fresh or risk ruining the meal. Many households near the coast enjoy a daily catch, which changes menus frequently and delights with variety. You understand that every meal is part of a larger story of survival, celebration, and community. It's a rhythm you come to rely on, marking the passage of time and the enduring traditions of the household. You might prepare sweet tarts or preserve fruit by drying it in the sun for winter use. Certain dishes must be prepared well in advance to allow flavors to meld. Pies need to be baked early, and meat must be cured or smoked. The kitchen becomes a place of organized chaos, every moment accounted for. You become adept at adjusting recipes according to what the season provides, always mindful that tomorrow's meals depend on today's preparation. This is the season when the kitchen truly shifts into preparation mode for the long months ahead. They mark events like weddings, births, and religious festivals. When preparing for these days, the kitchen buzzes with urgency. Extra hands gather to peel, chop, and cook. The air fills with spices like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, imported luxuries that add warmth and exotic notes to dishes. You spend hours preserving food salting meats, smoking fish, drying fruits, and pickling vegetables. Apples are turned into cider or stored whole in cool cellars. Pumpkins, squashes, and cabbages pile up, ready to be stored or eaten fresh. Early spring also means the first eggs from the village hens, small and often speckled, a welcome source of protein after the scarcity of winter. You boil, fry, or bake them into simple dishes. Your pantry, however, still holds much of the winter's preserved stores, dried beans, salted meats, and root vegetables kept in cool cellars. The contrast between fresh and stored food creates a fascinating blend on the table. Pottages simmer with a mix of new and old ingredients, bringing warmth with a hint of freshness. Summer is the busiest time for the kitchen. Gardens burst with herbs, rosemary, sage, thyme, whose scents mingle in the air as you gather handfuls to season dishes. Fresh fish is plentiful during the summer months. You walk to the market or river with baskets in hand, choosing from freshly caught carp, pike, or trout. As summer fades, autumn sweeps in with a burst of harvest activity. Game becomes a significant feature of autumn menus. Winter feels the most challenging. Fresh produce is rare, and the kitchen leans heavily on preserved foods and root vegetables like carrots, turnips, and parsnips. Special occasions and holidays break the monotony of winter fare. Throughout the year, you navigate the delicate balance between available resources and the desire for flavor and celebration. Freshness is a luxury, and preservation a necessity. Feasts are about more than food. They are moments of joy, status, and community. You know the importance of timing. Your role in these seasonal cycles deepens your connection to the land and the community. When the feast finally arrives, the kitchen's work transforms into a celebration. Seasonal cooking in the Tudor kitchen teaches you patience, creativity, and respect for nature's cycles. You know from the moment you enter a Tudor kitchen that fire is both your greatest tool and your greatest threat. Open flames roar in the hearth, casting flickering light on the walls and filling the air with warmth and smoke. The flames need to be fierce enough to cook meat thoroughly and boil water, but not so wild that sparks fly onto nearby wooden beams or thatched roofs. You keep a constant eye on the blaze, knowing the dangers of letting embers escape or of piling fuel too high. Cooking, heating water, and baking all depend on this constant fire, but you're always acutely aware that one careless moment could turn the entire kitchen, or worse, the whole house, into a blazing inferno. Fires must never be left unattended, especially overnight. You practice quick thinking, smothering small fires with sand, dousing flames with water, or beating embers out with blankets. Streets are narrow and filled with timber-framed houses, often crowded close together. A blaze that starts in one kitchen could easily jump to the next through shared walls or roofs. You hear stories of entire villages destroyed because of a single careless flame. Larger fires require more help, and you rely on everyone in the household to form a bucket brigade if needed. The urgency of these moments teaches you how crucial teamwork is. When the kitchen is empty, the fire is banked, meaning coals are covered with ash to keep them smoldering safely without risking flare-ups. Distractions, exhaustion, or haste can be deadly. You develop a cautious mindset, always watching, planning escape routes, and knowing where the nearest water or sand bucket lies. You use clay or stone firebacks behind the hearth to reflect heat and protect wooden walls from direct flame. You understand the house sleeps on a fragile thread, relying on constant vigilance. Stories of nighttime fires spreading through villages serve as grim warnings. But on mastering fire safety, a constant living awareness that shapes every move you make in the busy, smoky Tudor kitchen. You also see chimneys lined with stone to reduce the risk of fire from smoke and creosote buildup. But these measures are imperfect. Managing fire well is a sign of skill and respect, a mark of your worth in the household. Chimneys often become clogged, leading to dangerous smoke and even flare-ups. Every day is a lesson in patience, attentiveness, and respect for one of the most powerful forces in the kitchen. The dance with flames, soot, and smoke is both a challenge and an essential part of Tudor life. Fire is woven into every aspect of your day. You tend the hearth, feeding it with logs or coal to maintain the right heat. You've witnessed the quick actions needed to treat burns with herbal salves or cool water, although medical knowledge is limited. The pain and scars serve as constant reminders to respect fire's power. The sound of a fire bell ringing through the village sends neighbors scrambling with buckets and ladders. You've been part of these frantic scenes, where people risk everything to save their homes and possessions. The kitchen itself is a risky place. Timber beams, wooden tables, and straw-filled rushes make excellent tinder. There is no organized fire brigade like we know today. The closest help comes from neighbors, friends, and family, forming a human chain to pass buckets of water. Firefighting tools are basic, mostly buckets, shovels, blankets, and axes to create fire breaks. Tools and flammable substances like cooking oil or tallow are stored carefully away from open flames. Even simple habits, like tying back loose sleeves or hair, make a difference. Your clothes, made of flammable wool or linen, brush against hot pots or embers. A sudden gust from an open window might spread the flames unexpectedly. Children or servants rushing through the kitchen might knock over buckets of embers or spill hot liquids. You've seen small fires start near the hearth that quickly grow when unattended. The smoky air irritates your eyes and lungs, but it also reminds you to stay alert. You develop a careful rhythm, moving slowly when near the fire, keeping flammable materials at a safe distance, and ensuring tools like pokers and tongs are always at hand. Despite these precautions, accidents happen frequently. A dropped candle or a misplaced pan can send sparks flying. To prevent disaster, the household establishes clear rules. Buckets of water and sand stand ready as first responders to any blaze. The dangers extend beyond the kitchen. Fires in the home or neighborhood can spread quickly. Some households install fire guards, iron grills placed in front of the hearth to keep sparks contained. In times of crisis, everyone knows to shout warnings and ring bells. You also learn that preparation is key. Keeping the kitchen tidy and free of loose straw, hay, or piles of firewood reduces fuel for accidental fires. Despite all efforts, injuries from fire and burns are common. Learning about fire safety in a Tudor kitchen also means understanding the limitations of the time. As a kitchen worker or servant, you carry the heavy responsibility of preventing fires while managing a demanding workload. At night, fires are banked and hearths dampened, but embers remain a hazard. Beyond practical safety, fire carries symbolic meaning in the Tudor home. It represents life, warmth, and sustenance, but also danger and destruction. You come to appreciate the delicate balance between fire's usefulness and its threat. In the end, your survival and success depend not just on cooking skill. You may not realize it at first, but the Tudor kitchen is a crossroads of the world. The foods you handle are not just from the local fields and forests, but from far-off lands brought by merchants navigating treacherous seas and long caravan routes. These were expensive treasures, sometimes costing more than gold by weight, and they quickly become symbols of wealth and sophistication. You see them in noble households, used not only for flavor, but for showing status at feasts. Trade has transformed the kitchen, introducing spices, ingredients, and cooking ideas that were unimaginable to earlier generations. A little too much nutmeg, and a dish can become overpowering or bitter. Spices must be kept dry and free from pests, requiring tightly sealed containers or chests. These fruits are essential for festive cooking, adding sweetness and texture to pies, tarts, and meat dishes. Sometimes spices vanish from markets for months, forcing you to adjust menus and recipes. Nobles compete to impress guests with the most lavish spice blends and exotic dishes, and you feel the pressure to master these flavors. The kitchen becomes a theater where food showcases power, wealth, and knowledge of the wider world. You learn to substitute where possible or stretch your supplies creatively. Their long shelf life makes them valuable year-round, and you become skilled at rehydrating and using them in various recipes. You learn to navigate these preferences, tailoring dishes to please different palates. Sugar attracts ants and insects, so you vigilantly protect it from contamination. These stories enrich the kitchen atmosphere, making you feel connected to a larger world despite the kitchen's humble walls. You learn to store citrus fruits carefully to prevent them from rotting in the damp kitchens. You know their value means they must be measured precisely and used judiciously. Waste is unacceptable, and every pinch counts. This respect extends to cleaning and maintaining the tools used for grinding and mixing these delicate ingredients. While the nobility revels in rich spiced dishes, many common folk cannot afford such extravagances. The kitchen is no longer just about survival. It's about innovation, connection, and the evolving art of cooking in Tudor England. You find yourself organizing chests, cupboards, and pantry shelves with great attention, ensuring that the precious cargo remains usable for as long as possible. Farmers begin growing herbs and crops introduced from abroad, hoping to supply kitchens with fresh versions of exotic flavors. You realize that every pinch of pepper or sprinkle of cinnamon carries with it stories of distant lands, perilous journeys, and changing times. Markets swell with new goods, and you see how these changes ripple through society. Their meals remain simple, based on local produce and grains. The contrast highlights the growing social divides, even in something as everyday as food. You experiment with layering flavors, balancing heat and sweetness, and combining native and imported ingredients in innovative ways. Exotic spices come with stories and cultural significance, often mentioned by guests and hosts during meals. You witness how dishes are served with an eye for presentation, incorporating these foreign elements to impress. Spices mask the flavor of less fresh meats, which is why their use in kitchens is both a blessing and a hint at the limits of preservation. The exotic aroma of cinnamon or clove becomes a way to elevate everyday meals or impress guests. But with these new flavors come new challenges, both in how you prepare dishes and how you manage the kitchen. Spices are the most prized imports. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and saffron arrive in small quantities, packed carefully in barrels or sacks. New spices and ingredients arrive packed in unfamiliar containers, requiring careful unpacking and storage. You must protect them from moisture and rodents, common threats in damp, busy kitchens. The slightest mistake could spoil precious stock and provoke anger from the household. Their use isn't simple, though. You must learn the right quantities and combinations. Besides spices, new ingredients arrive from overseas. Sugar, once rare and costly, begins to appear more frequently. It transforms desserts and sweet dishes, although it remains a luxury for many. Their rinds are candied or used fresh, providing contrast to the heavy, rich foods typical of the time. These fruits are seasonal imports, and their arrival is eagerly anticipated, especially in wealthier homes. The sweetness is used sparingly, often combined with fruits or spices to make preserves and confections. You learn to handle sugar carefully, knowing its value and fragility in the humid kitchen environment. Citrus fruits, like lemons and oranges, are also imported, adding bright flavors and a touch of acidity to Tudor recipes. The influx of new foods brings new preservation techniques and storage needs. With trade, exotic dried fruits like raisins, currants, figs, and dates also become part of the Tudor pantry. But trade also introduces challenges. Prices for imported goods fluctuate wildly depending on politics, piracy, and harvests abroad. The demand for these rare ingredients spurs economic and social change. Alongside these culinary effects, trade impacts the daily work in the kitchen. Your cooking techniques adapt as well. The addition of spices and sweeteners leads to the development of new sauces, marinades, and preserved goods. The influence of trade is also visible in tableware and serving customs. The growing availability of spices and new foods also challenges traditional Tudor tastes. Some guests prefer the familiar plain flavors, while others crave the excitement of novelty. Beyond food, trade brings information and ideas. You hear tales from merchants about distant lands where these spices and ingredients originate. However, you're always aware that access to these luxuries is uneven. The arrival of these imported goods also sparks changes in local agriculture and economy. In your daily kitchen work, handling spices requires care and respect. The challenge of preserving spices and imported foods also shapes the design of storage areas. In the end, trade changes the Tudor kitchen from a simple cooking space to a vibrant intersection of cultures, flavors, and ideas. This knowledge makes you proud of your work, knowing that you're part of a global exchange that shapes history. Living in Tudor England, you quickly learn that your experience in the kitchen and the food on your plate depends heavily on your social standing. The divide between nobles and commoners isn't just about wealth. It stretches into every corner of life, including how meals are prepared, what ingredients are used, and the very size and function of the kitchens themselves. If you find yourself working in a noble household, the kitchen is a bustling, expansive place, often larger than many common homes altogether. It's filled with a variety of cooks, scullery maids, and specialized servants, each assigned specific roles. You handle rare spices like saffron and nutmeg, imported sugar, exotic fruits, and a wide selection of meats: beef, pork, venison, and sometimes even game birds like swan or peacock. You likely work alone or with only one other helper, managing a small hearth and a handful of basic tools. Cooking methods are straightforward: boiling, stewing, or roasting over the open fire, with little time or fuel for intricate techniques. And crates of spices, all kept in cool, dry cellars. Noble kitchens may have easier access to clean water and more stable hearths with chimneys, while common homes struggle with smoky, poorly ventilated cooking areas and limited water sources. Nobles indulge in fresh meats and sweets, while commoners consume more grains, legumes, and preserved foods. You see this divide not only in the ingredients, but in the way meals are served. Nobles dine on finely carved dishes, sometimes with multiple courses, while common families eat from shared pots. Common kitchens make do with whatever they can store on shelves or in earthenware jars, often vulnerable to pests and spoilage. You prioritize practicality, using every scrap to avoid waste. The focus here is on simple, hearty meals that can feed a family through hard times. Your skills and experiences in the kitchen connect deeply to these social realities, influencing everything from ingredient choices to cooking methods. Fuel shortages, spoilage, and seasonal availability affect all cooks. Cooking in Tudor England is not just about food. It's about navigating a complex web of social expectations and realities that shape everyday life. You learn to adapt, making the best of what's at hand, whether it's stretching meat with grains or making flavorful stews from humble ingredients. You might be responsible for pastry, sauces, or roasting large joints of meat. Common cooks rely on oral traditions and practical knowledge passed down through generations. For nobles, meals are a display of status and hospitality. For commoners, food is survival and comfort. These differences shape your daily work and your relationship to what you cook and serve. Staples such as porridge, coarse bread, root vegetables, and salted or smoked meats dominate the menu. Common celebrations, though joyous, remain modest, with simple fare and communal sharing. The kitchens have specialized areas, separate rooms for baking bread, roasting meats, making pies, and brewing ale or wine. The nobles value variety and opulence, often ordering new recipes to reflect their wealth and taste. Dishes are rich and complex, with sauces, marinades, and multiple cooking methods used to impress guests and display status. Presentation matters greatly. The food must look as luxurious as it tastes. You may hear the constant clatter of pots and pans, the roar of multiple hearth fires, and the hurried footsteps of servants rushing dishes to the great hall. Here, the ingredients come from all corners of the known world. You are expected to prepare elaborate feasts for banquets and daily meals, sometimes catering to dozens of people. Contrast this with a common household kitchen, where space is cramped and resources limited. Imported spices and luxuries are rare or non-existent. Instead, you rely on local herbs and preserved foods. Storage is another difference you feel daily. Nobles have pantries stocked with barrels of salted fish, barrels of dried fruits. Water supply and fire management vary as well. A social hierarchy also governs who gets to eat what. You notice how festivals and celebrations amplify these differences. Noble banquets showcase the household's wealth and power, featuring exotic dishes and entertainment. The roles within the kitchen reflect this gap. Noble cooks often have formal training or apprenticeships, learning complex recipes and techniques. Despite these contrasts, both kitchens share some common challenges. Working in either setting, you develop an understanding of the cultural significance of food. Ultimately, the kitchen becomes a reflection of society itself, a place where class distinctions are not just seen but tasted. You come to appreciate the resourcefulness required to work within these boundaries and the creativity needed to make meals that nourish both body and spirit, regardless of social rank. Looking back at Tudor kitchens, you might be surprised at how much they've influenced the way we cook and manage our households today. Although the times have changed dramatically, many of the lessons learned in those smoky, bustling kitchens continue to shape modern cooking, food culture, and even household organization. Tudor kitchens were not just places to prepare food. They were centers of family life, work, and social interaction. You'd see cooks, servants, and family members sharing tasks, stories, and meals around the hearth. Even if the average household could not afford exotic spices, their gradual introduction set a trend toward more complex seasoning that is now a staple in kitchens worldwide. This early globalization of ingredients laid the groundwork for today's diverse culinary landscape. This system laid early foundations for today's culinary professions and kitchen hierarchies. You can see the echoes of this in modern kitchens, where chefs, sous chefs, and line cooks each have defined responsibilities, all contributing to the success of the meal. The stark differences between what nobles and commoners ate remind you that food has long been a symbol of identity and hierarchy. This legacy informs how we think about food accessibility, cultural food practices, and the social significance of what we eat. This idea that the kitchen is a gathering place persists in today's homes. Its legacy reaches far beyond its smoky hearths and wooden tables. As you cook, organize, and share meals today, you carry forward centuries of knowledge, adaptation, and cultural exchange, rooted deeply in the kitchens of Tudor England. The organization of food storage, fuel, and kitchen tasks required careful planning and cooperation. From smoky hearths and open fires to the clever ways people preserved food and managed busy households, these kitchens were far from the relaxing places we might imagine. Until next time, take care. They were full of challenges, hard work, and fascinating traditions that shaped not only Tudor life, but also the cooking and kitchen culture we know today. Your support really helps this channel grow, and I love hearing from you. These practical lessons about efficiency, cleanliness, and division of labor are still relevant in modern home management and professional kitchens alike. That way, you won't miss out on any of our upcoming videos exploring fascinating stories from history, culture, and more. Managing a kitchen, well, has always been about more than cooking. It's about running a complex, dynamic space smoothly. The use of color, texture, and garnishes reflected a desire to impress and delight diners, an approach that resonates with today as culinary arts and food styling. The way food is plated and served continues to be a critical part of the dining experience, connecting us to centuries-old traditions. Open-plan kitchens where families cook and eat together echo the Tudor emphasis on the kitchen as a social hub, a place to connect beyond mere sustenance. While many techniques and ingredients were inherited from medieval times, Tudor cooks also embraced new ideas brought by trade and exploration. This balance between honoring the past and adapting to new influences is a dynamic that continues to drive culinary evolution. First, consider the importance of the kitchen as the heart of the home. Without refrigeration or modern preservation methods, you learn to use techniques like drying, salting, smoking, and pickling. These methods not only extended the life of foods, but also added unique flavors and textures that continue to inspire contemporary cooking. Today, chefs and home cooks alike have revived many of these practices, appreciating how they enhance taste and sustainability. Tudor kitchens also taught us about resourcefulness and maximizing what's available. The use of herbs and spices, introduced through expanding trade in Tudor times, transformed English cooking and helped shape the flavors we now associate with British cuisine. Managing fire and smoke was a daily challenge, teaching cooks patience and adaptability qualities still essential in the kitchen, despite modern conveniences. The later development of chimneys and enclosed ovens, which began during and after Tudor times, revolutionized cooking and eventually led to the stoves and ovens we rely on today. Tudor kitchens also highlight the evolution of cooking technology. The open hearth was the central feature, demanding constant attention and skill to control heat for boiling, roasting, or baking. The division of labor in Tudor kitchens, where specialized roles like pastry cooks, scullery maids, and butchers existed, helped establish the professionalization of cooking. Food presentation was another aspect Tudor kitchens took seriously. Feasts were as much about visual impact as taste. Moreover, Tudor kitchens underscore the relationship between food and social status. You also see the influence of Tudor kitchens in household management. Finally, Tudor kitchens remind you of the importance of tradition and innovation working hand in hand. In sum, the Tudor kitchen was a place of transformation, of ingredients, techniques, social customs, and technology. Thanks for exploring the hidden world of Tudor kitchens with me. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history and want to learn more about how everyday life in the past influences us now, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Feel free to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or questions about Tudor kitchens or any other topics you'd like us to cover. Thanks again for watching, and remember, history is more than dates and events. It's the stories of the people, places, and kitchens that shaped our world. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you found this interesting. See you in the next video.